Hello there, I'm Jan James, and this is the Hope After Breast Cancer podcast, where our beautiful team of contributing experts share their wisdom about how we can heal our unseen wounds after a breast cancer diagnosis. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. It's Jan James with Hope After Breast Cancer podcast, and it's a fun day for us. I've been promoting that we're going to be talking with today's guest about mindful eating. It is November, and 'tis the season for all of us to be going, oh my gosh, why am I eating that? And why am I craving that? And why, and all those things. So I'd love to introduce you to my friend and mindful eating facilitator coach, Dawn Hopkins. Hello there.
Hi, Jan. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show. I'm so excited about this.
Oh, we're all excited about it. I've gotten so many comments in our Sex After Breast Cancer group. We're broadcasting live into that group right now. So I'm going to be monitoring questions that may come in as you're speaking, but we're really here just all to soak up knowledge from you. So would you be able to give us a little background about you, Dawn? You're someone that I can't easily introduce myself, unfortunately, because your list of accomplishments is yay long. And so what do you say when somebody says to you, Dawn Hopkins, what do you do? What do you say?
So I'm the founder and president of Inspiritus Yoga. And as part of that, I offer yoga education programs, classes, workshops, retreats, training. I'm also a licensed Am I Hungry mindful eating facilitator. And I also helped co-develop the mindful eating and yoga program for the Am I Hungry program. So I've got my hands in lots of different things. I'm an ERYT 500 master level yoga instructor, which simply means that I train trainers and I provide continuing education and things like that for yoga teachers. But one of my passions and I believe one of my purposes in life is to share about mindful eating. Mindful eating and yoga, no kidding, transformed my life, helped me heal my relationship with food and my body. And it's been, a place where I've seen incredible transformation in my clients and, the people that I work with. So I'm very, very passionate about this. I had an eating disorder when I was young, and I thought I had overcome that until I met Michelle May. So I met Michelle about 20 years ago. At the time, I owned a women's gym, and I was a fitness and personal trainer. And I did a lot of, group fitness training. And we had a diet program that I felt very incongruent about teaching, because I knew what diets did to people's psychology. I knew, about the yo-yo dieting and how that impacted people and their relationship with food. And I had been on my own journey with that for many years. So when I was introduced to Michelle, it was like a breath of fresh air. Finally, someone's talking about why we eat in the first place. And it's not about prescribing to a specific diet or something like that, because diets don't work. So I went through her program just to really get informed about what it was about, so I could refer people to her, my clients to her, and discovered, oh goodness, I still have a lot of residual stuff from my eating disorder when I was young. And I had become kind of a restrictive eater, and I had that mentality. By the way, one of the things we say, Jan, is how you do anything is how you do everything.
I have heard that before,
I was
sure.
living that.
Yes,
totally. And it's so funny because I know that Michelle knew it about me, but she's such a great person. Just come and, go through the program so you can be informed and you could be more educated and be able to, tell people what it's about. And what I discovered was I still had a lot of healing to do in my own relationship with food. And that's where it began. So I became one of her first facilitators back in 2006, and have been doing this as part of the work that I do personally, but also in the work that I do with my clients and students ever since. And it has changed my life.
It's so exciting. I mean, you and I have been talking before this about, I've gotten snippets of your story and everything, but I'm so inspired by the fact that even as a yoga trainer of trainers, I don't know, I'm encouraged to understand that you've got your own luggage that you're dragging around about things, right? And I know we're going to get into this. I'm certain we're going to get into this, but like I think about my own personal relationship with food, truly from the moment I was born was guided by my family, especially my mother, right? And I have tapes that are continuing to go in my head of things that she said to me, and sometimes even shaming things that she said to me about different things about my anatomy, about my eating habits, those kinds of things. And I know that that colors my decision making with food. And so we're going to learn some of that stuff. I want to make sure that we tell the gals, Michelle May, who you've mentioned a couple of times, is the founder of the Am I Hungry program, right?
Right.
And right. And so can you tell us just basically about her so we have a little
Absolutely.
foundation?
So, Michelle was a medical doctor. She was a family physician for many, many years. And she had her own struggles with uh, dieting and, her relationship with food. And she noticed that her husband and her kids didn't have the same struggles that she had. So she really started to try to understand, like, why are they so instinctive in their eating and why do I struggle in this way? And she started doing a tremendous amount of research around that, and over time developed this program. And it was born about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, I believe, from her own pain and her own struggles around food. And so, isn't that the way it goes, Jan? Our
Yes.
misery becomes our ministry, and our
Yes.
pain, can be our purpose. And
Mhm.
so, the things that we go through, as we start to heal them, many of us are called to be in service to others and help them heal as well. And that's kind of what happened with Michelle. And so she and I met in about 20 years ago, right when she was getting started with this program. And then she made the decision to leave her private practice and do this full time because she felt so passionate about helping people, heal their relationship with food and their body in the way that she had. And so, and I can't say had, because it's an ongoing journey. We go through seasons of life where things get disrupted, and certainly the last couple of years dealing with COVID and all of the stress that we've
Mhm.
experienced, we're seeing people struggling more in their relationship with food. And even those of us who are instinctive in terms of our eating, sometimes we overeat and sometimes we eat for emotional reasons, and so but it's about awareness. And so
Mhm.
this program is a non-diet, weight neutral approach to eating that helps us understand why we even eat in the first place.
What the heck
So,
is that all about? What? It's a
right.
non-diet, weight neutral
Mhm.
program. When you said that to me before, I was like, what in the world? That's unique.
Yeah.
So I think you told me that you recommend throwing away the metal box in our in
Get
our
rid of that scale. It's, yeah. Because when
wow.
we do that, we're giving a metal box power over how we feel about ourselves. And that's, it's just going to perpetuate those behaviors that are born of shame and guilt
Mhm.
um, and truthfully, that really don't serve our becoming our best self, our highest self. And so the approach that we take with the Am I Hungry program is it's a mindfulness based program. So just like yoga is a mindfulness based program, it's about bringing attention, awareness, and presence to our eating. So think in terms of, how we get the urge to eat and then we just reach for food unconsciously, right? It's just, we have this urge and we react. And by the way, react means to act again and again and again in the same way, right? And it's unconscious. Um, the Am I Hungry program gives us a pause point so that we have the urge to eat and we take a moment to pause and understand, am I really even hungry in the first place? And what does that mean, right? Because some of us have gotten so disconnected from our cues for hunger that we don't even know what hunger feels like anymore. But that pause point, then we can respond rather than react. So it puts us in charge. Okay.
Mhm.
Whereas, when we're on a diet, which we call restrictive eating, or we're in a space of overeating, vacillating between those two extremes, there's no choice. It's just a reaction. Right.
Mhm.
So, we, and maybe the diet is a choice, but now it's coming from the outside in. It's not being driven by our body and its urges and its needs. Instead, it's something that's being, placed on us from the outside in. So this is an inside out approach where we are exploring and learning to understand our own body's unique signs and symptoms of hunger, our own unique triggers that maybe are born not from hunger. So what are the reasons why we eat that are not as a result of hunger in our body, and what do we do with those, right? And then helping to learn and understand what to eat, like what feels good in our body, and what helps us to feel healthy and vibrant, and then what foods maybe don't work for us. And everybody's unique and different in that way. So we use a cycle, an eating cycle, and I'm kind of starting to touch on some of those points. So I'm going to go backward for just a moment to go forward, because I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit. But we use what's called an eating cycle, and what that does is it brings awareness to decision points that we make around food all the time that we're just unconscious of. Okay, so we're just bringing awareness and consciousness, and giving ourselves choice, to these decision points that we make all the time that we're not necessarily aware of. So we utilize 3 different eating cycles. We talk about the instinctive eating cycle, which is the cycle, honestly, we were born into. We were instinctive eaters once upon a time. At some point we got disconnected from that, but that's how we were made. And then the overeating cycle, which kind of is self-explanatory, right? And then the restrictive eating cycle, which is when we're dieting or imposing restrictions in terms of our eating. So we are going to compare and contrast the decision points along those cycles together to have an understanding of how these decision points work. So if you guys are listening at home, right, go ahead and take a piece of paper, and I want you to draw a circle on that piece of paper. Okay, because a cycle is a cycle. One thing feeds to the next, and so on, and the cycle continues. So draw a circle. At the top, at 12 o'clock, write the word why.
Got it.
At 2 o'clock, write the word when.
Okay.
At 4 o'clock, write the word what. At 6 o'clock, write the word how.
Okay.
At 8 o'clock, write the word how much. And then at 10 o'clock, write the word where.
How interesting already. Okay.
Okay. So why is the starting point? Okay. We want to know and understand why we eat in the first place. Okay. So thinking in terms of instinctive eating. So somebody who doesn't worry about dieting or managing their weight or anything like that, they just haven't struggled in that way. Think about why they eat. Why do they eat?
Well, I said to you when we were talking on the phone the other day, because I was kind of mentally preparing for this call, I typically wake up, and for several years now, I've had a healthy protein bar for breakfast. And it has become like just this habit that I wake up, I get some water in my cup because I'm a big water drinker, and I grab a bar. But there was no inclination that I was hungry. It's what I do when I wake up. Right. So there we go, as far as the unconsciousness of it. Right. So why am I eating? I was eating because it was habitual.
Right. So that's incredible information to have, because that's going to empower your decisions moving forward, right? To know, like, oh goodness, sometimes I just grab something and I eat it because it's time to eat, or, this is just what I do at this time of day, or, this is part of my routine or whatever, without ever checking in, am I even hungry, right? So in terms of when we're in the instinctive eating cycle, hunger is what's driving it, right? It's because we're hungry. So when we're overeating, why do we eat sometimes when we overeat?
Emotion. Again, the unconsciousness of it all. I feel like I probably am a super unconscious eater. I just am grabbing stuff all day long just because it's there.
Because it's there. Sure.
Yeah.
So the sight or sound of food, the presence of food, we call that being food suggestible, just seeing food, smelling it, driving by a restaurant, seeing an advertisement on TV or in a magazine, whatever, can trigger us into thinking we're hungry, right? Or have the urge to eat. So it can be emotional, it can be environmental. It could also be physical. We can have physical sensations in our body that we confuse with hunger, right? So, think about, sometimes we might have a grumbling in our stomach and we might confuse that with the, hunger pangs, or a growling in our stomach. We might have a headache and reach for food, because sometimes we confuse pain with hunger. Boredom can be another one, stress, so many other things that we might confuse with actual physical signs of hunger. What about when we're restricting what we're eating? Why are we eating then? If we're on a diet, for example, why are we eating?
Well, because we want to eat less, but oh my gosh, I think about, the myriad amount of diets that I've gone through in my adult life, and reading labels and weighing things, and that dang Weight Watcher scale, all that kind of thing. So we're doing it because we feel like we need to restrict our eating in order to feel healthier. But I don't know that it usually turns out that way. It may turn out that way for a bit, but not for the long haul.
Yeah. And the why might be purely to nourish our bodies, right? It's also, maybe about the rules of the diet, right? So I'm just starting to kind of flesh out the differences between the different eating cycles here. So think in terms of, am I hungry? The question is, am I hungry? Asking ourselves, am I hungry? And how often do we just have the urge to eat and we reach for food without ever even asking the question, am I hungry? Okay. So that's how we're starting to lay out that instinctive eating cycle and letting hunger be the driver. So now moving to that next decision point at 2:00, I told you to write the word when. So when do I want to eat? So thinking in terms of an instinctive eating cycle, okay, so that intuitive, our body's just designed this way kind of eating cycle. When do we know it's time to eat?
Well, I think like in the past, probably during my healthiest season, I got there. I understood that my body needed fuel, that I was out of fuel. And I think maybe it was the feeling of, a dip in blood sugar, or, you can identify it in lots of different ways. But for me, I think it was more that kind of thing, that I was like, oh, I definitely don't have anything in the tank and I need fuel.
Perfect. Exactly. So we have these physical signs and symptoms of hunger, and they come from two different places. One is the absence of food in our stomach, right? You just said, my tank is empty, right?
Right. Right.
And so when our tank is empty, our stomach is a muscle and it continues to contract. And if there's nothing in there, it's still doing that. So we might feel growling or hunger pangs or, an emptiness. Sometimes we might even feel nauseated, right? Because there's
Mhm.
nothing in there and the acids are churning and it's not breaking anything down and we might feel, ugh, right?
Mhm.
Um, we also, I point to my head, I'm pointing to my head right now for those of you who can't see, um, that it can come from like in our head where we have that low blood sugar. And when our blood sugar drops, we might have a headache, we might feel dizzy, we might have difficulty concentrating, we might get irritable. We might have a sense of urgency around food. Remember the Snickers commercials,
Yeah.
hangry, right? We might get a little hangry.
Yeah.
So, those are those physical signs and symptoms of hunger. And so in mindful eating, we train you to identify those and also to start to tease away at the physical signs and symptoms that maybe aren't hunger driven, or some of the other things that confuse us into thinking we might be hungry. So we're going to get to those in a second. So I want you to think about an overeating cycle. So if we're in a space of overeating, when do we eat?
Um, when we're, for me, I don't know, snack at night or boredom, I think, and sometimes stress,
Mm-hmm.
emotional eating, those kinds of
Yeah,
things again.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
So those are going to be some of the, indicators that maybe we're moving into an overeating cycle because it's not coming from hunger or signs and symptoms of physical
Mhm.
hunger, but instead something else is driving it.
Mhm.
And we talked about, emotions, environment, medications,
Mm.
things that we go through as breast cancer survivors, right? Like the
Right.
medications that we're on, or, just the stress of the journey, all of that can play a part into um, eating for reasons other than hunger. How about when we're restricting or we're on a diet? When do we know to eat then?
Well, when the diet tells us to.
Yes, exactly.
It's not the
So
boss of me, Dawn. I don't like those
no, you're
diets
not
that
the
are
boss
the
of
boss of
me.
me.
Exactly. Exactly. I have this new saying, Jan, for all the years that I restricted and dieted, now I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, if I can't do it for a lifetime, I'm not going to do it for a day. Why bother? And so you're not the boss of me. But
Right.
yeah, it's the rules of the diet that are determining when we eat, right?
Mhm.
So that kind of feeds right into, I love to use punny little things when I'm talking about food. So it feeds the next decision point, which is what? So what do we eat? So when we are instinctive in our eating, what do we eat? Think about an instinctive eater that somebody who doesn't struggle with their weight or whatever. Like, what do they eat?
Oh, it just seems like, I don't like, I think I'm thinking about one friend in particular that wants to go to Pita Jungle and have a salad. And I'm like, well, salad's not on the top of my list or whatever. So, but she's thin and fit and yada da, all that stuff. And so, yeah, so that's a really loaded question. I feel like some of us eat what we want to eat, what sounds good, what may taste good. But if I'm hearing you correctly, I mean, what we want to do is get to a point is to choose foods that are good for our bodies, that will fulfill what our bodies need. Is that true?
That's part of it. Absolutely. We definitely want to eat in a way that supports what our body needs, but sometimes we eat what we want too, right? So it's balancing eating for nourishment with eating for pleasure.
Ah,
And by the way, I always say if it wasn't meant to taste good, God wouldn't have made it taste so good. right?
Right.
If we weren't meant to enjoy it, it wouldn't taste so good. So it's balancing that. People who eat instinctively aren't always thin, and they don't always just eat quote unquote healthy foods. Okay. So in mindful eating, all foods fit. And when we do that and stop labeling food as good or bad, okay, which by the way, the diet du jour is going to change the rules on you all the time.
Right.
What's good on one diet is bad on another. And then the next iteration of whatever diet, that changes. So it's very difficult. It's very confusing to keep up with what's good and bad. And then somehow we judge ourselves as being good or bad when we eat those foods, right? So we throw that out the window. All foods fit. When we let go of labeling food as good or bad, and we put everything on an even playing field, we tend to overeat less, and we tend to eat more in moderation. So there's a whole psychology of deprivation that comes into play here, where when we deprive ourselves of something, we actually give it more power, and then we think about it more, and then we restrict it more. But then when we don't restrict, when we go from being in control to being out of control, we end up way overeating it. If we had just allowed ourselves to eat it in the first place, we might have had just a little bit. We might have eaten in moderation and moved on. Wow. And so that's part of like retraining, right? Retraining our brain to think of it a little bit differently. So think about the overeating. What do we tend to eat? What do you tend to eat if you are in an overeating cycle? We're all a little bit different. I like sweet and salty.
Yeah, I think I do too. I have a here, hang on. Here's my confession right next to my desk.
There it
butter
is.
Pretzels.
Salty crunchy.
Peanut butter pretzels. Yeah.
Yeah.
So love that.
Yeah. Okay. How about when we're on a diet or in a restrictive eating cycle? What do we tend to eat then?
Again, what the diet says we should
eat. Absolutely. Right? It's whatever the diet is prescribing. Okay. So again, from the outside in. And then now we start to like those foods are good. And then the foods that aren't on the diet suddenly are bad. And then we give them all kinds of power over us, and we ruminate about it and think about it. And, oh, when I have my cheat day, that's what I'm going to eat. Oh. And we do this whole psychology thing, right, around the restriction.
This is really actually a little radical for me, Dawn. I mean, the stuff that you're saying, I guess I never, the question about when we're restricted eating, what do we eat? When do we eat? It is that's a great word for it, that it is restrictive, but like, who wants to live that way for the rest of their lives, right?
Right.
That doesn't make any sense at all. No wonder we fail at diets so often.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, if I could have back all the time and energy that I spent restricting and trying to be in control of my eating and trying to do it right and be good, and like, if I could have that time back, oh my gosh, the things I could have accomplished with my life. So we're doing it now. It's fine. Better late than
good.
Never.
Fresh start,
yeah.
Right.
But one of the things that you're talking about, Jan, that comes up often. So when we are in that mindset, we talk about yo-yo dieting. It's on the diet, off the diet, on the diet, off the diet, right? So, and there's no in between. Okay. In control, out of control, in control, out of control. So we talk about what's called the middle way. And so instead of a yo-yo, we look at like a pendulum. And so a pendulum also has two extremes. So we have the extreme of overeating. We have the the other side, which is restriction. So, and we can bounce back and forth. And by the way, it requires a whole lot of energy to hold us at one point. And the minute you let go of it, what happens to it?
You come back. Yeah.
Swings right back over to the other side. But when we let go of those extremes, there's this comfortable place in the middle where it just finds that natural middle way. And that's what instinctive eating is, and mindful eating is finding that middle way, where we're not on these polar extremes. And we call that the eat, repent, repeat cycle, because we eat, right? Overeat, we repent, go back to the diet, we repeat, go back, and we bounce back and forth between these two extremes. Instead, there's that middle way, which is flexible and comfortable, and there is some give in it. There might be times we do overeat a little bit. Maybe we're at a party, maybe it looks really good, maybe we just checked out for a moment and we were a little mindless for a minute, we were doing something else, whatever. And then there are other times where maybe we eat a little less, and that, and it all kind of balances out. But it's finding that comfortable middle arc, as opposed to these violent extremes that we tend to vacillate between. So the next decision point then, at 6 o'clock, I told you to write how, and I should be reminding you guys, sorry about that. So how do we eat? Okay, so when we're eating mindfully, we're eating with awareness, intention, we are present, we are fully invested in that one act, doing one thing at a time, right? Our brain, we think we can multitask. We can't. We think we can, but our brain really can only focus on one activity at a time. Some of us are really good at bouncing around between different activities, right? But honestly, we can only focus on one thing at a time. So we give eating our full attention, and we set an intention. Maybe our intention is, I want to feel better after I am done eating than when I started. Or maybe it's, I want to feel comfortable and be able to have energy to go about my day, or whatever our intention is. But then we're redirecting our attention back to the act of eating and being present with it the whole time while we eat. So think in terms of overeating. How do we eat when we're overeating?
Oh, totally unconscious, I think.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Mindlessly, unconsciously.
Right. You
Yeah.
like, you may want one piece of candy, but then you end up having 30 pieces of candy or something, that kind of thing. That I think we just, if we're not aware of what we're doing, we can really overdo, for sure.
Yeah. And sometimes if we're overeating, or we accidentally overeat, it might be because we're doing something else while we're eating, like we're in front of the TV, in front of our computer, or we just, completely throw caution to the wind, and we just like, oh, I gotta, even out the level of my ice cream, or I need to like make sure the brownie lines up so no one knows that I ate it. Those little slivers across the whole thing, so no one can tell that you took a big chunk out. Or
there's an idea. Wow.
Evening out the rows of your cookies, whatever.
How funny. Yeah.
So no, but these are just some of the things we do. We might hide, while we eat, or we might hide the evidence after we've eaten a package of,
sure,
whatever. But it's, there's a lot of behaviors around our overeating that just disconnect us from the food going into our body, and really savoring the experience and being mindful and present with it.
So you're really saying that the distractions of this world, right, are, we've got to figure out how to manage that so that we're just thinking about eating when we're eating.
Yeah.
Right.
So that we're fully present while we're eating. That's how we can enjoy it the most. Also, we can identify if we're not fully enjoying it. We might be like, this food doesn't taste as good as I thought it did. I don't want this. Instead of just continuing to eat it because it's there, right?
Right.
So, and we can gather information like, how does this food feel in my body? Mindfulness helped me realize that gluten doesn't feel great in my body. So do I still eat it sometimes? Yeah, absolutely. I'm from Chicago. I eat pizza. Duh. That's what, hello. But that being said, I know how I'm going to feel. And when I'm really conscious, if I start to eat something and I notice, oh, my stomach doesn't really like this, even though it tastes good to my tongue and my, I'm enjoying it that way, my stomach's going, this doesn't feel good, so we can really dial into those nuances of what the communication information our body's giving us while we eat too. So what about when we're restricting? How do we eat then?
I think I don't know. The first word that comes to mind for me is paranoid. Like, you're paranoid. Are you doing it right? Or are you doing it wrong? Or there's so much emotion that for me is around restrictive eating. It's not good emotion, I don't think.
Right. Guilt and shame and making sure we're in control and following the rules and right? It's exhausting. It's exhausting. And so, and then we might, instead of enjoying movement of our body, we might do it to penalize ourselves because we ate something that we shouldn't have, that kind of thing. And so we end up disconnecting from our body's natural desire to move, because now it's penance for what we ate. And so, and that happened to me as well. I love movement. I have always been active, but I remember when I was in the throes of my eating disorder, I would run and I would count how many calories can I burn while I run? It's X number per, I'm not even going to tell you because I used to know, I actually don't anymore, thankfully, how many calories I was burning in a run, because then I would count how many calories I ate that I needed to burn. And then I used to love running and I stopped loving running because I made it about punishment. So we do that as well sometimes.
That's interesting.
Let that go.
Ooh.
All right. So, so let's move into the next decision point at 8 o'clock, which is how much do I eat? So in an instinctive eating cycle, how much do we eat?
Probably enough.
Yeah, just enough. Right? Just enough. Yeah. And so we use an eating cycle, which I'm not going to introduce now. I'm going to do that next week. I'm going to introduce the eating cycle. The hunger scale. We're already doing the eating cycle. Okay. Sorry about that. Gotcha. So the hunger scale to help us know how hungry we are and then how full we are. And so when we're checking in frequently and we're eating slowly and mindfully, our body is sending us information that lets us know when we're becoming full. And fullness is not feeling distended or uncomfortable or needing to like unbutton our pants. Instead, it's having just enough food that we are no longer hungry, but we're not uncomfortable, so that we have the fuel that we need to go about our day, right? So eating just enough. Contentment, practicing that, right?
Right.
So what about when we overeat? How much do we eat then?
Too much.
Too much. Sometimes to the point where we feel like we're gonna pop, right?
Right.
We're gonna talk about that next week too, so stay tuned. But the body is telling us information all the time. Are we paying attention to it? Are we going slowly enough? And are we present enough to notice? And so when we're overeating, we're disconnected from that, or we just go, I don't care. And we eat anyway, to the point of maybe feeling uncomfortable, distended, and even sick. Okay. Mm-hmm. How about how much do we eat when we're dieting or in a restrictive eating cycle?
I think it usually feels like not enough, or it doesn't, or it's not the right things, or, it's not satisfying. Typically.
What do you mean? Like a handful of celery sticks and and a piece of chicken doesn't do it for you? Come on, Jan.
Yeah, right.
Right. So,
yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be how much the diet prescribes, or whatever the rules of the diet are. And yeah, we lose that balance I talked about earlier of eating for nourishment, but also eating for enjoyment, where we feel satisfied at the end of the meal, not just because we have enough food in our stomach, but because we enjoyed that food and we feel satisfied.
Right. Right.
All right, so that brings us to our final decision point, which is where. So where do we invest our energy from the food that we eat? So think in terms of instinctive eating again. So we're back in the instinctive eating cycle. Where do we invest our energy when we're eating in a way that is instinctive?
I don't think I understand that question. Let's see. Can you give me more
So
info?
yeah, so think, when we eat food, it gives us fuel.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that fuel, then how do we utilize that fuel? How do we, um, where does the energy from the fuel that we eat go?
Well, it goes to fuel our body, right? Is that
Yeah,
what
for
you're saying?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to fuel our body, it gives us the energy we need to live vibrant lives, right? To do all the different activities that our life demands of us. And the things that we enjoy too, right? So thinking in terms of overeating, where are we investing our energy when we're overeating?
I think, I mean, I feel sluggish a lot because I'm overeating, more tired than I want to be, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we might not have a lot of energy when we overeat. We might just feel kind of sluggish and we just want to lay down until that feeling passes. Sometimes there's that emotional investment of energy too. So we might, beat ourselves up for it, which by the way, only fuels the overeating cycle. The more we enter into guilt, shame, blame, the more we're fueling that cycle. So it's like, oh, well, the heck with it. I've already screwed up anyway. So I might as well just keep eating. And we just kind of perpetuate that. When we are dieting or we're in a restrictive eating cycle, oftentimes we're investing our energy in making sure we're following the rules, right? We're being
Right.
good. We're doing everything the way we're supposed to do. So, that can consume a whole lot of energy. So that maybe kind of paints a picture a little bit. So the good news is that, like I said earlier, each and every one of us were born as instinctive eaters. That's how we are designed by our creator. And so I want to paint a picture for you because I have an 8-month-old grandbaby who is just the epitome of instinctive eating. So I'm going to kind of use him as an example because we were all, babies, toddlers at one point in our lives. And so, you think in terms of like a baby or a toddler, why are they eating? Well, they're eating because they're hungry, and they're going to let you know when they're hungry, right? And there's just this intuitive knowing, right? When they're hungry, they know they're hungry, they know they need fuel. And so they make it known. It may be a temper tantrum. It might be, if they're able to ask for food, them asking for food. It might be, those temper tantrum episodes where we don't even know what's going on because they're just hangry and that sort of thing. But they know instinctively when they're hungry. And, as we start to learn their communication style, we start to know and understand when they're hungry. What do they eat? Well, they're going to eat whatever the heck they feel like eating that day.
Yeah.
And that's it. Because when we try to eat them something that they don't want to eat, what happens?
Oh, that's no rejected.
It's rejected, sometimes violently.
Yeah, sometimes is right. Yeah.
Right? They're not gonna eat it if they don't want that food, and so how do they eat? Well, they eat in a way that's very mindful, playful. They experience their food, right? I'm not encouraging us as grown women to go and like play with our food, but certainly, they're having an experience with their food. Sometimes they're, checking out the tastes and the textures, and they might be playing with it in their hands. They might be drawing on the table with it, whatever, but they're experiencing, they're connected to it, and they're enjoying it, right? How much
It
do
makes
they?
me think that they really are super present with their food is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And enjoying it, enjoying the experience, right? And then how much do they eat? They eat as much as they need, and that's it. And if we try to overfeed them, again, what's going to happen? It's coming back at us,
Are
right?
you
Or it's going
telling me, wait, just hold the phone there a minute, Missy. Are you telling me that the Clean Plate Club is no longer valid?
No, it's not. Throw it out the
Ugh.
window.
We've all been taught such bad
I
habits, right?
know,
I
right?
know.
Well, and it came from the depression mentality. I mean, like these are, from generations back. Like I think of my grandma, she lived through the depression. You ate what was in front of you because that's all you had. And, there was very much real deprivation taking place.
Mhm.
It wasn't just the kind of deprivation we impose upon ourselves now in
Right.
form of dieting and restriction. It was real.
Mhm.
And so that's where it came from. But we don't have to do that anymore. We live in a plentiful, abundant society. There's food everywhere. Thankfully, we are blessed in that way, right? And there are other cultures that aren't,
Right.
and people even in our culture who are not. The fact if you're here right now, you probably are not living with a lot of food insecurity,
Mhm.
right?
Right. Right.
But for those who are, that's a very real thing.
Mhm.
And and it is something that we address for sure. So but going back to the toddler is just going to eat until they're finished. And try to give them more and it's going to come back at you. It's going to go to the dog or go onto the floor or whatever. And then where do they invest their energy? Well, they're busy, right? They're exploring their world. They're moving all over the place and, in play and movement and just, they're active. And active doesn't mean going to the gym, you guys. I'm just letting you know that active just means we are moving our bodies in a variety of different ways. It could be gardening. It could be, playing with our grandkids. It could be, any number of things that, are movement based, but they're active. So we have this innately in us. Like this is how we were born and how we were designed. At some point, there was a disconnect. And Jan, you talked a little bit about that at the beginning, just our well-meaning parents and grandparents and, whoever we were raised by or were raised around modeled different styles of eating for us. Sometimes food was maybe used as to show love. My grandmother, oh my gosh, she was a food pusher. She would just push food on you because don't you love me? I made this for you. Have some more. And then she would
Right.
just keep feeding us. And at the time, I didn't have the tools I have now. If I did, I would have said to her, Grandma, I love it so much. Let me wrap it up and take it home and I'll have it tomorrow when I can enjoy it when I'm not full.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's we get hurt or injured. Oh, let's have some ice cream, that'll make you feel better. And so it starts in our doctor's office. They give us a lollipop when we get a shot,
Oh gosh, yeah,
so,
that's true, right?
right?
Oh,
And
wow.
so we start to make this connection that when I feel pain or, when I'm hurt emotionally, physically, whatever, food is going to help me feel better. And it does temporarily, right? But
Mhm.
that's not what we really need, right?
Right.
So, lots of different reasons. Clean Plate Club, going back to the depression, like I mentioned earlier, lots of just different reasons how we get disconnected, from our cues for hunger and how our relationship with food might become less functional, right?
Yeah, I feel
So,
like I'm totally in a therapy session right now for sure. So I'll be sending you $150 in a minute. Yeah, seriously, I
love
think
you.
I'm having a flashback to, I grew up with two grandmas that were around all the time. And one of them especially, she loved to bake everybody's favorite pie, but a piece of pie to her was a quarter of a pie. But what you're saying
Yeah.
about the depression, because they grew up around the turn of the century and lived through the depression and everything, she felt, I realize now, just in sitting here, that she wanted to do that as an act of love to us because she had abundance again. And she wanted us to feel abundant, right? She was
Yeah.
pushing the food based on that, on her life experience, not because she wanted us to get fat, which all of us did, it seemed like, from her. She had beautiful cooking, but it, so yeah, that trained us in a very specific way. So, okay,
Mhm.
thanks for that therapy. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and we can start to unravel those
Yeah.
unconscious messages that we have around food. And
Mhm.
like you just said, it was an aha moment, right? You just had an
Yeah.
aha moment, something you hadn't discovered or realized, that was present in your relationship to food. So that's one of the cool things about this program is it starts to like peel away at the onion, so to
Mhm.
speak. And so we can really start to get to what the real drivers are and work with them in a way that helps support our healing
Mhm.
and our wholeness.
Sure.
And that to me is why this program is so transformational and why it's been so powerful for me.
That's awesome. Well, that is a great model to go through, and just to have to sit and think about. I'm going to have to go back through my notes. I've been making crazy notes, but no, thank you for sharing that. So Dawn, we're going to meet again next week. And so you
Yeah.
mentioned that we're going to go through the hunger scale, which will be great. That's good, because I think, most of us maybe don't pay attention to how hungry or full we are. And so
Mhm.
having some clues about how to do that will be super helpful. Um, you also mentioned we may be able to talk about some tips for the holidays and things of that
Mhm.
nature, right? But can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about, too, you and I have been brainstorming a bit. Uh, I recognize in serving this community that um, overweight seems to be just a nagging side effect post breast cancer. And I know that the tribal knowledge is, for instance, if you're on a hormone blocker, you can't lose weight. I'm going to tell you that back in 2017, I lost 40 pounds and I was on blockers. So I'm going to tell you that I don't believe that to be true. So we'll start with that and say, I don't think we want to use any excuses about cancer to keep us from learning about our relationship with food and how we feel about food, right? So we want to try and encourage all of you that want to improve your relationship with food by helping provide some information in the guide section. We'll be dropping posts along the way through these next few months for everybody to help kind of inch you along in learning about mindful eating. But Dawn, I said this in the newsletter that I sent out this week to those on my newsletter list, but for our podcast audience, can you just talk about the kinds of things that they can get by signing up for the Am I Hungry email list? There are some
Mhm.
freebies on that website that they can sign up for. So what would be valuable for them?
Yeah. So if you go to amihungry.com, you can sign up for the newsletter, which is fantastic. It has a lot. Michelle writes a very poignant article every month, and with really valuable information, but lots of different, tools and strategies that we can use in real life, right? That's what we want, not just information. We want to know how to apply it. There's also a place where you can upload or download, excuse me, the first chapter of the book, Eat What You Love What You Eat, which Michelle authored that book. And that's kind of the guideline that we use for our 8-week program. There's also 101 things to do besides eat. So when we're having cues or urges to eat that are not born of hunger, this is a really great tool that we can use to find other ways to utilize our time rather than eat. And also, there's a little tool that you can do where you can do an assessment of your eating style. to identify kind of what your tendencies are. One of the things I love to say is we can't change something if we're not aware of it. So this helps to bring awareness to, how our relationship with food is today. It changes over time, but it's going to take a little snapshot of like where we're at with our eating now and the style of eating that we're kind of navigating. And with the goal, of course, that we're going to continue to try to move more toward instinctive and mindful eating. So yeah, those are all great tools. Next week, I'm going to really dive into the how decision point. We're going to talk about eating mindfully, so that I can give you some tools and strategies you can utilize during the holidays and when you're out to eat, visiting friends, or just every day. So would love to have you join us for that. And if you do decide to join us, have something available to eat that you consider to be a bad food. And I put that in air quotes, because we don't define food as good or bad in mindful eating in our program. But if you have previously defined something as being bad, okay, we're going to practice something called fearless eating together. So, and then again, I'm going to give you some tools and strategies you can use. We also have an 8-week mindful eating program, a workshop series coming up in February that I'll be leading. So we can make sure you get information about that. And I'm offering $100 off of anybody who is a part of your groups, whether it's Hope After Breast Cancer or Sex After Breast Cancer, or anyone else who comes through you, Jan. So I know as a survivor, I like to say a thriver, 2-time thriver of breast cancer, it can take a financial toll as well. And so we want to make sure that we're giving you guys this information and making it accessible financially. That being said, I also do offer scholarships for people who are in need. So we'll work with you guys on that if needed. And that will begin in February, Mondays at noon. We're going to call it Mindful Mondays. Mindful Mondays.
Or they can watch on replay if necessary. But you
yes.
were telling me that 8-week program is by far the most successful way to get on track with mindful eating, right? Because you're practicing daily all of the things that you're being taught. And so I am definitely 100% in for that program. I'm really excited about that. So ladies, we'll be talking more about that along the way. So, we'll give you the details. And if it works for you, we really want you to join us, because I think that we all need better tools. I am, I'm 11 years out now from my diagnosis, but I'm at a place in my life where I don't want to die of disease that could have been prevented, because I'm overeating. I was already saved once from breast cancer, so I don't want to have to, why am I, kind of giving away my life, all these terrible habits that I have. It's just, I've lost track of how to get out of this hole, I think. So I'm super grateful that you're willing to share with us. And obviously I'm a great guinea pig for you, girl. I'm all in.
Well, I mean, honestly, anything can happen with a willing heart, and so just your willingness to explore this and to do it in a way that is open and honest and transparent, it makes all the difference in the world. And I would also encourage you to let go of any shame around it. There's no place for that. We cope the way we cope. And those were coping strategies that worked for us at the time that maybe aren't the best. And we're going to learn better coping strategies.
Right.
And help to heal our relationship with food so that we are freed up to, Jan, for you to be freed up to do all these amazing things that you do to help other people. And that's true for all of us, just to free us up from the bondage of dieting and overeating so that we can live these vibrant lives that we were made to live
Yeah. Amen.
and
No,
designed for.
I'm with you. I'm with you. So that's good. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, and give our love to Michelle. I hear it's her birthday.
It is her 60th birthday. I'm going to her party right after this. So
Woohoo! No, that's
I
awesome.
will
Good.
share your sentiments with her. And thank you so
Thank you.
much for inviting
Wow.
me to be a part of this. I'm so grateful.
No, it's really our honor to be able to host you and to learn from you. So I'm super excited for the impact that we're going to see with our Women Dawn. So thank you so much. Appreciate it very much. So we will see you guys all next week. This is Jan James for Hope After Breast Cancer. We'll see you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey there. Thanks for listening to our podcast. Every single week, our contributing experts share new tips to help you heal your unseen wounds. So please be sure to subscribe and like this episode. We'll see you next time.